The business case for manure and why we need to use it better moving forward in the business of agriculture. That's what we're talking about. Manure economics in this episode of the Business of Agriculture. Are you looking for productive efficiencies in growing higher yielding, better performing crops? New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more information to help you farm better. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. Got a great one for you today. Got two sharp ladies on here. They're going to talk about manure. Oh, yes, I know it's disgusting. Oh, it smells. Let's talk about the economics and let's talk about the environment. Let's talk about the fact that right now on farms across America, they are screaming. Literally, I'm recording this mid-November 2025. They are screaming. Chuck Grassley, senator from Iowa, fossil, needs to be gone. Been there for too long. Anyway, had a big hearing last week talking about the oligopolies in agriculture and their gouging these farmers. I'm trying to do my Chuck Grassley, but I'm not quite senile enough to do that. Anyway, there he went on talking about these oligopolies, actually called the monopolies. He's wrong. They're oligopolies if they are, in the fertilizer business that are gouging these farmers. Well, you know what? When you've got economic pressure on the farms to produce a crop and you have to have fertility, you've got the environmental issue right now that we have overused, mostly over-applied, especially the big ones, N and P, nitrogen and phosphorus, and it's in our watershed. Been hearing about this for 30 years and hearing it more and more and more in even agricultural places like Iowa. So you know what I did? I got two really smart ladies who happen to be from Iowa. You see, that's why I tied in Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley, the senator from Iowa. But you know what? I got two people that know a whole hell of a lot more about agriculture than him, and they know a lot about manure. Kellie Blair is a farmer in, I'll call it central-ish Iowa.
Okay.
And
yeah.
she is here with Nancy Bohl Bormann. Nancy Bohl Bormann is a PhD specializing in manure. She works for the University of Minnesota system, but she actually lives with her husband and farms in North Iowa. We're going to talk about the economics. We're going to talk about the environment. We're going to talk about all things manure. First off, we've underutilized it. We have treated it literally like shit. More importantly, moving forward, we can use this resource in a much more systematic and judicious manner to achieve big goals on our farms. Did I set that up right, Nancy? Your husband got a hold of me and said, hey, I'm a big fan of your show. I think you should have my wife on. And I dug into it. You sent me reams of data because you're a university type. And I started parsing through. I'm like, I have to have this lady on. And I said, but bring me a farmer. Let's talk about this from the economic, the environmental, the academic, and the practical. That's why we got you and Kellie on here. Talk to me.
Yeah, so you said, who else should I bring? Like, actually, Kellie and I go way back. We worked together doing nutrient management planning at the Mashop's large family-owned swine business back in 2007, and worked together for 7 years covering the state of Iowa, doing a lot of manure management planning, permitting, any kind of environmental technical support in that way. And we live about an hour apart, North Iowa, and both farm also, and been really into trying new practices and conservation also, and utilizing manure in that way. So anyways, we go way back, and glad to have her with us today too.
So, all right, let's talk, Kellie. This is something that the people would even make a mockery, like, oh my God, he's doing an episode of Business of Agriculture about, cow poop and pig poop. It's a real thing, first off. Secondly, we can utilize it. Thirdly, I made the economics case. You chuckled at my Chuck Grassley impersonation. It was a little too fast and deliberate to sound like him at this point. But the bigger point here is we've got this resource. We can use it, and we've sometimes underutilized it or even misused it. And I think that where we're going in the future, I said before we hit record, let's talk about the environmental, the agronomic, of course, the environmental, the agronomic, and the economic case for manure.
Yeah. So on our farm, we have both cattle manure, so solid manure, as well as liquid swine. And they're two completely different types, ways to apply, managed, the animals themselves are managed differently. So different challenges, both, in the aspect of timing of manure application, what nutrients we're getting out of the manure for our fields for fertilizer, and getting the work done. Who does it? The pigs are a custom feed operation, and we don't have a lot of decisions in what they're fed. So what we get is what we get out of the manure, but we also don't apply the liquid swine manure ourselves. So we got to deal with a custom applicator, when they're available, when can they come, and that type of thing. So you're talking about, environment, economics, and agronomics. It all takes
and the management, and obviously the management you're talking about right there. Which I want to go big picture on some of the facts that our friend Nancy sent me. But before I do, I think the big thing here is there's going to be people listening to this that say, I don't farm, I don't know if this matters. Again, there's the environmental part of it. I'm seeing crackdowns in Iowa. I'm seeing crackdowns in Wisconsin about nitrates in the water. We're hearing about it in a lot of agricultural areas. And then the other part of it is, if you don't farm and you're saying, why do I care about this? I just had a recording from my friends over at XtremeAg, and they are putting out here, Nancy, the economics. UAN, right? It went through just DAP, and they went through the standard fertility products that you would go and buy at your ag retailer. Most of them were up more than 100% year over year. That should make the case right there for looking at alternative fertility, and I think that's the big play on here. But I want you to give me some of these facts here. I can read them, or you can read them. You gave me some manure facts. Manure facts. Give them to me.
Oh, sure. Well, we can think about it. Synthetic fertilizers have only been around in, some decades, like previous to the 60s and 70s. Really, manure was the dominant nutrient until we had, more available synthetic fertilizer, so which definitely has increased, crop production in that way too. Some of the latest.
Well, back to that. Let's go to that one right there. Let's go to that one right there.
Yeah.
We chugged along, not really moving the needle. Kellie's fourth generation farmer. We didn't move the needle on yields until really post World War II, right? That's when the technology came. And synthetic fertility was a part of that. By the 60s, we were utilizing it along with chemistry and along with the mechanical. All those things kind of basically, 20s and 30s, we're just basically, we were in a whole further. 100 years ago, we weren't a lot further ahead than we had been 100 years before that. It's post-World War II time. What you're saying there, Nancy, is we started really being off to the races on yields. And so a lot of people are going to say, well, what's wrong with that? And you're going to tell me what's wrong with that.
Yeah, well, there's other things too. Synthetic fertilizers take a lot of substantial, fossil fuel energy to produce or mine, process, and transport across the country. And they have their own risks of nutrient loss on their own to the environment. I mean, regardless of the source, if you're over applying any type of nutrient, it has the risk, of loss to the environment, whether it's on, surface runoff or leaching through the soil profile. So those are definitely, things to take into consideration. And when are you applying, how many months are you applying it ahead of when the crop is actually going to take it, on either kind, especially when you're dealing with nitrogen. I think thinking of just a couple of the other benefits of sides of things, besides just nutrients, there's, different microbial things you're adding with manure. You're adding extra organic matter that can, help some of those soil health properties, like water infiltration, nutrient cycling, and those sorts of things too. So there's definitely some, micronutrients and all as well available in manure. But it's very tricky with all the sources. It may not all be nutrients as available, in the inorganic and organic fraction. So that's another, like Kellie said, between here the liquid hog manure, that nitrogen is going to be, likely available, pretty much that year. Beef manure, however, not the same.
And I think that's one of the hard parts of comparing commercial fertilizer with manure, and manure not getting the value that it should, because like Nancy said, all these things that are in it that aren't in the commercial fertilizer, but it's a pretty variable product. It's not like your commercial, it's, here's your analysis. That's exactly what it is. Manure is one of those things that it's like, people don't like it because they're going to put some manure on and do all that work. Well, I want to know what's there. And you can't always know that with manure.
If I go, even a person listening to this, because I've got non-ag people, investor types listen to this. If you go to Home Depot and you buy a 50-pound bag of 10-34-0 or 12-12-12, that means it's, that's the analysis from nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And you know that. When I say, yep, I'm going to buy the manure from the dairy farm down the road. They're going to truck it over. And we put manure on all my fields. That's why one of the reasons I rent my property to a dairy farmer is I wanted to improve the organic matter to, but yeah, do we know From one tank to the next, do we know what it is? It's roughly coming out of the same pit. It's pretty close. From one.
Is it well agitated too while you're stirring it? The bottom to the top can really vary in that case. Or solid manure, how much bedding is in one part compared to the other, or how decomposed is one part than another, like all those things.
Yeah, so you're dealing with a variable product. But to the other point, where I guess going into the facts and then the benefits, Nancy's point, Kellie, you're out there, you're saying, I'd like to leave this land better for generation 5 than we got it. Manure does that, the organic matter. And then the person listening to this says, I'm not an agronomy person. Why does organic matter, Nancy or Kellie? It's because...
Well, it just helps with that, infiltration of water holding capacity, being able to, the nutrient cycling part of it. I mean, there's many studies that correlate your percent organic matter in your soil to your potential yield and productivity of that land.
And for us, for the cattle manure, so we use corn stalks for bedding in the cattle barn, so we actually take them off the field. And so we're taking nutrients off the field, we're taking, stover off the field, and manure is a great way to put that right back and not lose that. As we take off that, higher and higher yield requires higher and higher nutrients to put back as well.
Yeah, I want to go through a few more of the big benefits, and I want to talk about how we use it and how we've misused it, because I think this is a big thing. And the person that's listening says, I don't have cattle, I don't have pigs. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to have to get away from that mindset, because in how we can utilize it. And I want to get into that also. Before I do, I want to remind you about my friends at Harvest Returns. My buddy Chris Raleigh started Harvest Returns because he looked around and realized that there are agricultural companies that need money. Could be a farm, could be a ranch, could be a meat processor, like one of his clients is, and said, you need money, but your business model doesn't fit the typical template when you go to an ag lender. We love our ag lenders. In fact, if you're an ag lender and you'd like to sponsor the business of agriculture, I need a sponsor for 2026. I'd love to plug you in. Are you listening, Farm Credit? Are you listening, Rabobank? Anyway, there's certain things that those ag lenders don't want to do. That's where Harvest Returns steps in. Harvest Returns has a pool of investors, 18,000 investors that put money into financing businesses in agriculture that maybe don't fit the template. If you want to take your business to the next level, Harvest Returns can bring the capital you need to reach your goals. Go to harvestreturns.com. That's harvestreturns.com to learn more about how you can get started with growing your operation today. And I was honest when I just said that. I do need another sponsor for 2026. You don't even have to be in the money business. You can be in any business, but I need a sponsor for 2026. So shoot me a line if you're listening to this and you're saying, hey, you know what? This would be a great way to reach a whole bunch of people. Thousands of people listen to this, and even more watch it on YouTube. If you're a listener, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's Damian Mason. Just go to YouTube and hit Damian Mason, type in there, hit the subscribe button, costs you nothing. You'll see all my great stuff, including my agricultural commentary that I shoot around De La Rosa Farms and when I'm traveling all over the United States of America and Canada. All right, the first option, the person will say, all right, you can keep talking about the benefits of manure, but that doesn't do me any good. I'm a grain farmer, and I don't have cattle. I don't have hogs. Well, many of those places, Nancy, you talked about it, the concentration of manure in some of these places, say southern Wisconsin, they've been putting the dairy manure out there for so long, they actually have more nutrients in the soil than they need. It's time to truck that stuff around. Can I make the economic case that even if I'm 20, 30 miles away from one of those facilities, I can still justify bringing it?
I'm not sure if it's potentially that far, but especially the dairy case, there's a lot more technologies coming in the manure space, whether, liquid solid separation, composting, digesting manure, just trying to make some different products that you can to try to, expand that footprint and value of the manure in the case of dairy. I would say the big case of being able to transport manure further is in the poultry litter space, where it's a, drier product. And I think that's really gaining traction in being able, if you don't have any manure access, that's something that a lot of brokers or co-ops are able to
because you're trucking a dry product. You're not trucking water with chicken litter. And Kellie's nodding her head right there. Do you use chicken litter?
No, we don't use chicken litter, but the fact of water, I mean, if you look at the liquid swine manure versus the cattle manure, the more water, the less concentrated it is. And, the drier it is, the closer you are to a commercial product that's more consistent and that type of thing.
Yeah. So we get liquid manure put on my property, and you are carrying a lot of water. But it seems to me that from a technology standpoint, we shouldn't be that far away from just being able to dehydrate off part of that water before we're bringing it. That way, we're bringing a more concentrated product. Is that day coming, Nancy?
Well, I'd say, like I said, the liquid solid separation, like trying just to even concentrate it more, or even you think just about technologies like we saw in the swine space of, before you had outside lagoons, and then you had, earthen basins and concrete storages, and now, underfloor pits where you're excluding that rainwater. The inside of the barn, they used to have like swinging waters, and now you have wet, dry feeders, and just tightening up that water management in a barn makes that so much more concentrated value. I mean, we could tell that, Kellie, going between different barns, you could tell who managed their water had different things in their barns, just even within the same system. So,
yeah. And even in a, not as technological way on our farm, we have cattle manure. And if we can have the time to stir that cattle manure to dry out, the stuff underneath is obviously wetter. So if we can kind of turn that, it's not really technically composting, but if we can turn that to dry it out a little bit more, we're going to get more bang for our buck, because the wetter it is, we're hauling water. It costs money to haul water. We don't want to do that. So.
Right, yeah, because some people are into active composting of their solid manure to reduce that down. So, yeah.
I want to get to the economics, but before that, on the agronomics, there's the thing that we've all seen that many people in ag probably have and many have not. The old thing about, it's disgusting, take a pair of underwear and bury them out in the field, and then bury a pair of underwear in the fence row. And the idea is that area that has been used synthetic fertilizer and synthetic chemistry over all these years, probably over applied, because that's mostly what we've done. The lack of soil biology out in that field does not degrade a pair of underwear. Over in the woods, where it's a woodland soil, or a fence row where there's trees growing and squirrels playing and rabbits pooping and all this kind of stuff, the underwear degrade by the time you put them in the spring until the fall, because the soil microbial activity, soil biology, et cetera, et cetera. It's a silly test, but it also is exceedingly illustrative. It illustrates the biology right there. That's another case for manure, and again, stopping the over application of synthetics. So both of you respond.
Yeah, our group has even done some of that work just for a simple visual study, just to show folks of it. Like, we were even joking this week. I was out at the American Society of Agronomy meeting and talking to some different people, and they were joking about how trying to expense a bunch of underwear on their expense reports for doing some of these tests. So yeah, having microbe just being able to help with that mineralization, and keep, there's just so many things that we don't even understand yet too, that people are trying to study. What are the different, microbial populations and actions, and are there different, I mean, you see it too, like on seed treatment, they look at things can we do to potentially help. I think that's an interesting thing that we're going to be hearing more and more about and now that they can do all kinds of, fancy things with genotyping and all that kind of stuff too, and DNA work.
I mean, how much more natural can you get when you take the corn that you grow, you feed it to your animal, they excrete it, and you put it back as fertilizer? I mean, if that's not the circle of life, I don't know what is. A natural system like that, when people are worried about what we're putting into these crops and that type of thing, in my mind, manure is a great resource, and it's a great thing for our crops.
Well,
and soils.
I spend a lot of time on social media because of my business, and I have to be out there and, putting my insights and all that kind of stuff out there. And I see other stuff, and I see non-ag people saying that we've sterilized our soil, we've killed our soil. That's not necessarily true, but it's pretty again, the visual wasn't invented by environmental wackos. The environmental working group didn't come out to our farms and bury this underwear to do this. We're showing it ourselves because we even understand that there's an issue. Overusage, and to Kellie's point, or to Nancy's point, 60 years of synthetics, it hasn't helped the soil biology, and we're just learning that. I mean, we didn't soil judging in 1985 when I'm an FFA. We didn't talk about soil biology. We talked about sand, silt, clay, erosion, talked about compaction. That's where this whole thing goes, Nancy. I think that we've got to have this mindset change about how manure fits into it, because as you pointed out, It was the dominant primary source of fertility until the 1960s.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think with either nutrients, a big key is, do you need like P and K on your fields? What are you, number one, like no matter even if you're using manure or not, are you soil testing your farm to know what you need? Are you going to get that return on putting these extra nutrients on, no matter what it is? Here in Iowa, we're pretty lucky. We have lots of cropland, so really we have plenty of land to put it on, as long as you're working with others, not just have a small land base. But overall, we have enough land for the manure we produce. On the East Coast, that isn't maybe the case, and they've had repeated manure applications on small parcels of land. You think the Delmarva Peninsula, for example, and they're trying to figure out how can we export out this poultry litter off of here, because we just absolutely are going to be able to go decades and decades without actually needing any pea, for example. So in that case, we're not quite there and out here yet, but
yeah. But like on our farm, you have to pay attention. And so one of the things that I do, we take soil samples, so I know what's in the soil. We take manure samples every year, so I know what's in all the manure approximately. But then I also have a running total Excel sheet of what's been taken off with yield, or if we've baled it, or if we had hay at one time.
You mean nutrient removal? You calculate nutrient removal.
We take off the nutrients, and then what did we put back on, either commercial or manure? What did we put back on? And I keep a running total. So, in a year like this where inputs are really high, I'm looking at these fields and like, you know what, soil tests tell me we're in like the very high range. We've been putting on maybe removal rate for all the crops. Why do I need it? Tell me why I need it when I'm at a very high soil test.
Mm-hmm.
Crop prices are low, input prices are high. I don't think we need phosphorus, and that's one of the decisions we have to make as a farmer. Now, you go maybe to a co-op and they tell you, here's a removal rate, this is what you need to put on. Maybe they don't, but I do it myself, because then I can control what I know, and I know what fields need it, and I know what fields don't. So
yeah, if you're testing very high in phosphorus, like if you actually read the publications, you have less than 91% chance of getting a yield increase. So you're like, that's pretty low odds. Farmers do a lot of other stuff that is questionable, but that's pretty low.
Especially commercial prices, if they've gone up 21%, I'm even wondering, let's take the manure to a field that needs phosphorus, not to a field that doesn't need phosphorus, because I don't need to waste
maybe it's worth hauling it an extra mile to that field, even like calculate if you actually could use it. Then a field close by, yes, it's closer, but you're not going to get any P value out of it.
So let's go to the economics on that, since you just brought up going that extra mile. And that's silly. I mean, and because if you were trucking it the way we truck crap from China, plastic goods, they put them on a container, they ship them across the Pacific Ocean, they put them on a train, put them to a truck, all that. And you're talking about, can I justify the trucking of manure? I'm going to say, because the person listens, like, how the hell does an extra mile matter? Well, it's because A, you might be hauling water, because B, you're not hauling it as efficiently as a containerized unit. It's bulky, and you might even be hauling it with a tractor versus a semi. I think those are the arguments why location is why manure has been over-applied in places like the Delmarva Peninsula, as you say, because they had the chicken industry there, starting in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And they got, it's small geography, and they just go right out in the field back and put on chicken crap. We've got to start justifying the transportation of it, in my opinion.
And, we on farm we do, because we have to figure out, even with our own fertilizer, we do a lot ourselves. We bring it to the farm ourselves because it costs us money to have somebody else do it. Or hauling grain off, transportation costs are high, and it has to go into that return on investment just as much as buying the nutrients themselves and that type of thing. And so there's just a lot of figuring you have to do to figure out what's worth it, and do we have time, or do we have the infrastructure to do it? Do you even have a truck to haul it? How much time will it take to take, if you haul manure 20 miles away, I don't even have time to do that because it takes too much time to haul it over there, that type of thing. So there's a lot of information that goes into trucking
All right. Well,
in
Kelly,
itself.
I think that you know what, when your back's against a wall on your margins right now on commodity prices and with fertility prices continue to be, all ag inputs continue to go up by double digit percentages, it changes that calculus. You can
Yes.
probably justify
Yes.
a 10-mile further journey now because of that.
It looks a lot different than it did. Like if I look at my fertilizer spreadsheets that I have from 10 years ago to now, even though in the last 3 years for our cattle manure, we have gone from around 5 ton an acre to about 2.5. We split it in half so we could take it to more fields because it takes us more time, but because of commercial fertilizer costs, it's like, well, I'm going to spend my money on time instead of on commercial fertilizer because I can. So,
on the economics, Nancy, one of the sheets you gave me here, approximately 28% of non-land costs for corn crop production are fertility. So, in other words, I'm spending more than a quarter of my spend on producing crops, and it probably doesn't vary. It's probably similar numbers on other crops. But anyway, I've got to start getting smarter about this if I'm a producer, right?
Right. I think a really fascinating study that Brad Carlson did. He's a Minnesota Extension educator, and he looked at the FinBin data, which one of the largest farm financial databases, looking at people's profitability and fertilizer use and just excluding manure. He found in 2023 that the 20% most profitable farms spent 33% less on fertilizer than the bottom 20%.
I want you to say that again. I want you to say that again.
I know it's confusing.
I love that stat.
I do too. It says a lot of stuff. The 20% most profitable farms in Minnesota spent 33% less on fertilizer than the bottom 20% of farms. So that's just saying something. These farms are honing in, and what do they actually need to move the needle on production for yields, but getting the most return on that investment.
And that was just commercial fertilizer.
And that's just commercial fertilizer. I know. You just wondered. I really want to try to do some stuff with manure. That would be crazy.
You're telling me, Nancy, on top of if I manage my commercial fertilizer correctly and add in manure, I might make a profit.
It'd be even better. It should be better. I know. Right now, it said on our farm, we used to have livestock, and we don't anymore, but we're still benefiting from some legacy manure applications. But, looking at our just fertilizer costs, just estimated for 2026, they're over 20% more than they were last year. So the crop price is about the same, just those increased input prices, making sure those purchases count towards actually making a profit.
So I get the truck, I get the transportability issue, I get the fact that but okay, chicken litter works the best because it's a dehydrated product essentially for transportability. Swine and dairy that are liquid are two of the worst because you're trucking water, and then beef is still pretty good, although you don't have as much beef manure because a lot of beef animals are out, on the prairie kind of thing, cow-calf operators. But that works okay because it tends to be dry. But, okay, we improve. The economic incentive looks like it's there to me right now to improve the method to take the water off and make it a more transportable product. I think so. Can you not make the economic case for that in light of if these fertilizer prices don't incentivize that, nothing will.
I think just one other thing to think about, a lot of the studies also have shown over the time is that more and more people are paying for manure that they aren't producing, or that, that's getting exported off a farm too. And there's getting value attributed to that. So that's another item. Like, are you producing enough manure? Could you actually get some, instead of, a lot of, in the 90s and such, you had to maybe just give away manure if you couldn't use it yourself. Like, can you capture some of that value to your farm and get it to some of your neighbors potentially? So, there's a lot of different ways to look at that, how you want to value that, and depending on your state's regulations, how that looks like. But that's definitely something to look into too.
And I think, if you're looking at getting the water out of the manure, I think the big logistical issue with that is individual farmers. I can't afford that I can't afford like a digester for my 2,400 head barn of pigs, that type of thing. It's got to be a pretty bigger scale. And then there's a lot of other things that go into that are outside of my realm. But I would agree that I think it's a great idea to get the water out of that, but yet I think as an individual farmer, I can't afford that.
Right.
I think that's why you see some of those newer technologies on very large dairy farms.
Yep.
Right.
Because they have the quantity.
Yeah, the economies of scale works when you get to talking about thousands of cows in one place. I want to dig into a couple more things about where this goes and why it matters. Before I do that, I want to remind you about my friends at Redox. You've got to get the most out of your nitrogen, speaking of all these fertility products, and there will be, trust me, there will be more eyeballs on you from a regulatory stance 5 years from now than there are right now, especially on the application of nitrogen. So you know what? There are products that can help you reduce your applied nitrogen, like, for instance, RDXN. RDXN is backed by more than a decade of research. It's gaining a lot of momentum with growers, including people like me and these girls right here who are from the Midwest. RDXN is a patented, proven, plant-active botanical extracts designed to improve your nitrogen efficiency by 50% while boosting your crop quality and your consistency. If you want to learn more, go to redoxgrows.com. That's redoxgrows.com. Manure only goes on about 10% of the acres. Only about 10% of the applied acres, Nancy.
In the U.S., yeah.
In the United States. If I were a farmer, I would, you can say, oh, the economics of it. I think we're not counting all the economics. If you do, Kellie, it's just a one-to-one comparison to synthetic, you're not giving the manure the value because, again, the organic matter improvements, the biology, et cetera. So I think you've got to put an extra multiple on the economics of manure.
Micronutrients.
Yeah. And like I did a quick comparison, apples to apples, right? On our cattle manure that we apply. So that's a dry cattle manure. What we apply this year, our plan is to put on about 2.5 ton an acre. And Iowa State has, for custom rate, since it's our own equipment, we don't charge it, but it's about $7.40 to apply. So $18.50 an acre to apply about 68 pounds of phosphorus and 71 pounds of potassium, and not including, right, all the other stuff. Well, commercial is probably about, I think, $50 more per acre to apply. I'm not including sulfur, I'm not including nitrogen, I'm not including the micronutrients. So that for us just tells you right away that it's like, we need sulfur for the corn. Manure gives us sulfur. More and more sulfur for farmers is becoming an issue.
Yeah.
And so, right there, as a farmer, I'm going to say, let's go on more acres with my cattle manure if I can. The hog manure is a little bit different because of the cost of it is a little bit more. That's really hard to put apples to apples, but just for comparison right there, if I did my math right.
Well, I'd say that we have a very smart following, a very smart listener base here, and they're like, man, that chick just broke out the numbers and has it down to $18.50 per acre. Yes, they are smartly looking at their costs as you would if you were a business person.
Yeah.
And again,
and that commercial application is just for the nutrients. That's not for application or anything else. That's just straight for the nutrients. This is for the application, and we don't have to pay for the nutrients for the manure. So, I mean, that again, it's hard to compare apples to apples with manure.
No, but you just made the economic case that if I have to pay for trucking, if I can get it and I have to truck it 50 miles, we can all punch out what trucking rates are, because when you just said it was $18.50 versus commercial at $50, not counting application charge at what, $10 an acre or something like this. Yeah.
So I can figure out how far can I haul it to make it equal our commercial costs, and it'd be quite a long ways, but we don't have that much to do. we don't have that far to go and that much.
Do all of your acres get covered at least every couple of years?
Oh, probably. We probably have about 20% of our acres get manure, whether it be cattle or pig. And the pig manure is, again, harder to haul further. The cattle manure, we really try to mix that up. Some landlords really don't prefer manure. And that's another thing we have to deal with, and that's fine. That's their preference. They own the ground, so we do what they say. So
what's their argument? What's their argument against
it's the variability. And I mean, I can't argue that, because I'm going to be a landowner someday, and I'm going to demand what I want on my ground, and I'll get to do that when I'm there. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's a straight cash rent, what the hell difference does it make? You're the one that's going to have that concern. So,
yep.
Nancy, I'm going through some other stuff here. And the regenerative. We've been hearing about this for a while. I read Gabe Brown's book, Dirt to Soil, Livestock, and we got away from diversification and got into specialization about the exact same time that you're talking about, when synthetics became, by the 80s, diversification was already going away. And then obviously the farm crisis made that, even accentuated that, or exponentially changed that. We have moved into a realm of specialization. It's not like the old days where you've got a hen house and you milk 12 cows, and you also have some beef cows, and you have the hog building, and then all that manure goes on all those fields. So diversification changed the utilization of manure. Will we go back?
I think that's a really tricky thing, because even on the livestock side of things, like, it's expensive to build a new barn today. Like, you do not see the construction of new animal feeding operations like you did. Now, whether people have just a small hobby farm, that's another story, I guess.
Well, even on our farm, so we tried to diversify by bringing in small grains, hay, because we wanted to make all of the cattle food on the farm. Made sense. That was when prices were pretty good. Prices are not as good. So when we have this giant combine that, it costs a lot of money, and we aren't making any money because we're just using the small grains, or we have to truck, actually small grains, infrastructure just doesn't work in Iowa for small grains. And so we actually had to move back away from diversification, because we had to focus on, our business at the end of the day, and we couldn't make that work. So we had to kind of decide, okay, we're going to go back to that,
specialization of corn and soybeans.
Yeah. And it's hard to, when your profit margin is bigger, you can make a lot more decisions. It's a lot easier to try new things when it comes back to, I really hope we're going to even make a profit. I hope we're going to, not be in the red at all. That's all I'm asking for. Is
if you're listening to this, and I told you should also encourage you to watch. You missed it if you're listening, if you're driving down the road or in your field. Kellie, just when she was illustrating, she did her hands where she made it bigger and she made it smaller. So if you were watching this show, you would have seen her visual that she put on, and she's now doing it with her fingers between bigger and smaller. So the point is here, you are still more diversified than many, because you didn't have the beef operation.
Yeah.
Obviously, many people in our part of the world, it's they grow corn and soybeans, and that's it. And so diversification favored this utilization. I keep using Asian words, just like my speech is the Asians of agriculture. Diversification favored the application and utilization of manure. In the old days, specialization took manure out of the equation. I just used a bunch of Asian words right there. I don't have a PhD like you, Nancy. I can sure as hell use a bunch of Asian words. Alliteration, another Asian word.
I mean, people are trying to look at other crops. I know they're trying to build an oat plant processing in southern Minnesota.
Kellie laughed at my wrapping up with alliteration, and you just went right into it. You are truly the
I don't know.
You're the manure professor.
I don't know.
I learned a lot working with Nancy. I'll tell you that much. She's a smart lady.
Like I said, people are trying to do different things, but yeah, it's hard when the markets and infrastructure are not quite there. I mean, they're doing research. I know what you like on Kernza, which is, a kind of a perennial wheat type product. Are these small grains eventually going to catch on? Or I guess we'll see what our trade tells us. If prices all of a sudden are depressed for corn and beans, will that put the pressure on to, have some other, will that force people? But farming here has almost gotten so specialized, kind of almost easy in a way, like, oh, you just have to put this down, put these chemicals down, you raise your crop. You don't have to think about it. Whereas in the past, like, oh man, if you had all these different things going on, you had a lot more trying decisions, trying to, make things go.
Yeah.
So
when we have a ethanol plant within, probably 20 miles of us, north, south, east, and west, why would I grow much else than corn? Because I have a place to sell it all the time. Prices aren't great, but I have a place to take it. Whereas
the ethanol
or anything else, I got to go pretty far. So.
Yeah, will the ethanol demand increase or decrease? That could really, change things out too. I guess another thing in manure, speaking on that kind of thing, you hear about CI scores, carbon intensity, and different things. Like one of the things, if you look at that, manure utilization gets you more points or more favorable in that case.
Right.
So in some of those things, you can.
And by the way, for the person listening to understand what you just said there, so since you both farm, we're talking about an ecosystem program essentially that pays people. You may have heard of carbon programs or whatever. And so what Nancy just said, CI means carbon intensity, and you're being scored on that. So if you utilize manure and all that, it enhances your scores. Imagine a credit score, but it's supposed to be about your footprint. Is that
like you reduce tillage, you have cover crops, you use manure. Those are all things that could help that particular score and eventually. So will that take off? Hard to say. But that's I guess another vote in that case. So
well, I'll go back to the diversification thing. There is a push for regenerative ag, and a part of that again uses livestock. Are we going to see livestock returning to some of these places that got away from it over the last 50 years? Kellie, you go first.
Well, cattle right now they're making a lot of money, but still the profit margin, we have to pay a lot of money to raise the cattle, right? So it's still not a huge profit margin, but, I can't really tell the future, I guess. But for us as young farmers, what brought us back to the farm was livestock diversification. I would, I don't know that I like to put labels on regenerative agriculture, but that circular model of agriculture, I love that idea because at heart, I think of myself both as a farmer and environmentalist. So I need this land to continue. And I like the idea, the idea of the old way of doing it is, we had the back 40 was split into, corn, hay, soybeans, you had everything and you switched it. And ideally for water quality, for soil quality, for prices, that makes sense, but infrastructure is not there. And it's going to take a lot of work to possibly do that. So I don't know what the future.
And by the way, when Kellie says infrastructure, you mean the marketplace.
Yep, marketplace. So like I said,
you can grow all the flax you want.
Yeah. Where do I go with it?
I was raised at the end of Flax Mill Road, and there is neither flax nor a milling flax in Huntington, Indiana, but presumably there was back in the 1800s. Anyway, infrastructure, yes.
I think that's. If I don't have anywhere to take it, there's no infrastructure. If I have to go 100 miles in order to take my flax seed, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for us.
But I think demographics also play into that. You keep seeing the average age of a farmer keeps rising, but becoming older and older and older, the average age. When is that going to transfer again to, the younger farmers, or how's that going to look when they get to make more decisions? And like here in Iowa too, there's a good percent of the land is rented. There's absentee landowners. Some of them just want the highest amount of rent. If you don't have the guarantee that you're going to be farming it again next year, how much are you wanting to invest in improvements in that land on any sort or anything? Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's also an interesting piece. When is that land transfer for decision making and being able to farm going to happen, and what are these younger people going to do? Because that was part of our thing too. Like, we bought an acreage, had 500 head of finishing hogs on an old building, had some 120 head of cattle, built a hoop barn, had another, 400 or 500 head of cattle, trying to do things as someone in your 20s and 30s, trying to make it go. But then it's also scary. Like cattle is a big variable. You can make a lot, you can lose a lot too. So just.
I want to go down the environmental road now. This is a very important thing. I was hired to speak in Western Nebraska in February, and I conducted a panel with my friend Temple from XtremeAg and some and somebody from industry. Nitrate levels in every well and aquifer they pulled were 3 to 6 times what EPA deems to be safe. Now we can haggle over whether EPA is a good source or whether those numbers are realistic. But the point is, in Western Nebraska, where there's about as many people in my office right now as live in the average square mile of in Western Nebraska. If they're talking about environmental issues and it's point blank period because of it ain't because of the car factory down the road. There ain't none out there. It's purely because of agriculture. When they're talking about out there, fertility products getting in the aquifer. We're talking about it in southern Wisconsin. We're talking about it in central Iowa. We're talking about it everywhere. I can make the case for fertility, but for manure over synthetic fertility, but you can also have it with manure. I think the issue is it's harder to over-apply manure in mass unless I'm right next to the river. But talk to me about the environmental thing moving forward. Whoever wants to go first. Who wants to go first? Kelly's nodding her head. She's getting edgy on her seat. So who wants to go first on it?
You start, Kelly.
I think we're probably both on the same page. Maybe just moving our heads differently. But I think big picture, as farmers, we need to recognize there is an issue. I mean, we cannot deny that. And so I only have control over my land, and I think both commercial and manure play a part in some of the issues. I talked about earlier a little bit about just timing more than anything. Is we have a commercial applicator come apply our liquid swine manure. Well, we're at their mercy. So if they have time and they're ready to go, we got to go. It doesn't matter if the soil is, so for nitrates specifically, if it's really warm and they're applying our manure, most likely going to lose a lot of our nitrogen. It's not going to stay in the soil. If it's cooler temperatures, it'll hopefully, stay over until spring. And so I think this is just like applying nutrients at the right rate is the right time. And as a farmer, sometimes you just have to make the decision. We have to just get it done. And maybe it's not the best for environment all the time. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But then, we do things like we reduce our tillage, we put in some cover crops, and those also help the water and the nutrients stay in the soil and that type of thing. So there's things that we can do wrong, there's things that we can do right, but sometimes it just comes down to a matter of timing, and I think we can always do a little better.
Speaking of timing, so Nancy, Kelly just made a little point there about we can degrade the value of the manure if we mishandle it, right?
Correct. I mean, like she said, like timing and how you're applying it. I mean, if you're applying it 7 months before the crop is going to need it for any kind of nutrient, there's a risk of, runoff loss or, filtering down, leaching loss too. You don't know. I mean, if you could predict the weather, we could tell you like, oh yeah, this is going to be okay, or it's not going to be okay. It just kind of depends on the year. How much rain are you going to get? How warm's our winter going to be? We know, like, even for anhydrous ammonia in the fall, like you want to put it on when it's 50 degrees and trending lower, because that slows down that microbial action. It's like, that's why you put food in the refrigerator, to slow down that microbial action. It's kind of the same concept. So, the cooler the soil, less risk you have of loss. That's also why, nitrification inhibitor additives can be helpful. It's not a guarantee, but it can slow that down another few weeks. So you may see a big boost from it some years. You may not see that other years. A lot of people do fall application, like Kelly said, it's drier, less compaction. There's more time. As soon as you get done harvesting, like, oh, I need to get out. I know there's been studies like even commercial applicators, just along with people that own their own equipment, it's almost about the same time because people want to get that manure hauled, after you get your harvest out. So there's that time, thoughts on things, but yeah, getting that, if you can incorporate your nutrients, you're going to capture that more of that nitrogen than leaving it on the surface. But also then you're like, well, I thought we wanted less tillage. True. But what are other things we can do? Can we do low disturbance injection? When you put on solid manure, okay, yeah, maybe you can incorporate it, but do you have to do, large amounts of tillage every single year either? There's different, all kinds of trade-offs in that kind of thing, and just trying to move the best management practices you can for what you got.
And I don't think it matters manure or commercial fertilizer. I think everyone has to be aware of what they're doing and timing and that type of thing, and weather.
Yeah, and you look at the maximum return to end curves that, are very common in the Midwest here. I mean, if you're putting on the economic optimum, it's, you're doing fine for the environment. It's when you go above and beyond that. So if you're putting on nitrogen you don't need, that you're not getting a return on, that's also the nitrogen that's causing environmental issues. So, I mean, it goes really hand in hand. I know Iowa's been really focusing on doing even more nitrogen studies with their NFACT tool, so they have even more scenarios you can put in there. But just take it. Are farmers even looking at this to even know? Like, have they looked at the most recent studies and seeing some of these things in that way?
So I want a couple of things on this. First off, it's like if a big, huge hog facility has a problem, and then a bunch of manure ends up in the creek. By God, the media comes out about that. Not so much when you have massive rains and the small town's sewage treatment facility ends up in the creek. But if the dairy farm, the pig farm does it, it's news, right? That seems to be the case. So that happens, but in general, farming is going to get more blame for things like applied nitrogen synthetically. But up until now, not as much. But by God, if the livestock facility has a spill issue, you hear about it, but not so much the 10,000 acres that got too much nitrogen applied that ended up in the watershed. You never really got the scrutiny, but we're getting it now. And I think that's where manure management is going to start looking, synthetic management is going to start looking like manure management has had.
Right. Yeah. Today, if you have a manure management plan, like Kellie does, you have to do soil sampling. You have to turn in or keep your records of your application. You have to, if you are hauling manure, you have to go to, manure applicator training. For commercial fertilizer in Iowa, you're not required for any of that. You're not required to do soil samples. You don't need I
can go and fling dry fertilizer out here.
Right. You can go purchase
as much as I want
anhydrous ammonia and go apply it with no certification. So that is a very big difference. And other states are different, like especially, in Delaware, if you farm over 8 acres, and put any kind of nutrients on, you need to have a plan and go through an education and all sorts of things. So different places.
And I think, like you said, manure management has become, in my opinion, better. I think one time I remember talking to my dad about, well, that feedlot is like on the side of a hill right next to a creek. And he goes, yeah, you got to have the water run somewhere. And then now our feedlot it's under roof. All the manure goes out to concrete bays where we hold it until we're ready to apply it. The hog barn, all the manure is stored in a concrete pit until we're ready to use it. It's not, we want to use it. I don't want it to just have the water run somewhere.
Right.
I want to be able to use it. And so I think technology has come a long way in the building of facilities, and it costs a lot, but they're getting to be better ways. We have a manure management plan that we're required by the state for our hog barn, but we don't have it for our cattle barn. They're really not managed any differently. I still take soil samples. I still take manure samples. I still make sure I'm doing it in the best way that possible.
Yep.
And because I want economic return on it. So
also, the economic return never happened, and the economic return never happened, and the environmental, it all walks down the same path, Nancy. Those farms in Wisconsin where they put the cow manure on the same 40 acres because it was close to the barn for 70 years, they've underutilized it economically, and they've environmentally done some harm, and it's because it didn't have a value, or it didn't have a perceived value. And that's the thing, because you generally couldn't go to the ag retailer and buy, 100 tons of cow shit, but you could go and buy 100 tons of 1034O, right?
And some of the geological factors also matter, where are you in karst topography where you even have a more direct conduit to your groundwater, or does it have to filter way down, in other places?
And
like I'm in central Iowa. So that's a different.
Yeah. And in central Iowa, for us, it's tile water, the subsurface drainage of our water. We're making it faster, and we're throwing down nitrates because we need it drained in order to farm. And that's not a bad thing, but there's impacts on that. And so now it's time, we're learning a lot more about the fact that, okay, so we sped it up and we got it out of the soil, but now what? We need to kind of slow it down and get those nutrients back in our soil too. So I would like to think that the farming community is understanding that, but I would like to see the needle move a little bit more on accepting that and doing that. But I think
accepting nutrient management or accepting manure.
Both. I hope that, and I think that now people are really utilizing manure because they have to with commercial fertilizer prices. I don't know that I know anybody that doesn't know the value of their manure. Maybe not quite like as nickel and dime, but yet
not as nickel and dime as you. They didn't punch it down to $18.50 applied.
I had to do that just this morning, so I just did that this morning for this, just to give you an idea. But
a few other advancements that even knowing what the nutrients are. Now there's a manure. The MAP program, the Manure Analysis Proficiency Program. So labs that analyze manure will get sent out exchanges. They analyze it, send back to the Minnesota Department of Ag. They administer it for the whole U.S. and Canada. And they'll help these labs, like, how's their accuracy and precision, and make sure that, so no matter what, if you sent a sample to this one lab, hopefully you'll be getting similar results if you send it to another lab too. They've also come up with recommended methods of manure analysis. Again, so to try to different labs do different methods also for analyzing these things, same with soil tests. That second version was just updated. Dr. Melissa Wilson, she's a manure extension specialist at Minnesota, was the editor of that. And that just came out in 2022. So things have definitely, trying to standardize for these labs, getting them to be more standardized in the methods they use, and then also, more precision in their techniques that they do. So you're getting, better results and feel a little more confident in what you're getting. But I think at the end of the day, looking at things like continuing to get samples of your manure, we always say the more samples, the better. So you have a better idea about what you're actually working with in that case. So.
Take me in the future. Our farmers, okay, you're forward thinking. You've done the numbers. All right, Kellie, is manure going to finally get its the respect that it deserves 5 years from now? Is it going to be a more commercialized product because of all these pressures that we're seeing? Take me a few years down the road. I
don't know. Honestly, I would have thought that same thing when I was working with Nancy, about 20 years ago now. So, that makes me sound old.
I know.
But I don't know, because there's still a lot of, even people that take manure, there's still farmers talk about how it smells. It's, it's still inconsistent at the end of the day. And as far as a nutritionist perspective for the animals, I'd rather feed the animals and get no nutrients coming out, because that means the animals have eaten it all, right? So, I mean, when we first started working with mash offs with hog manure, phosphorus was a really crazy thing. And it's like, oh, there's too much phosphorus in the manure. There's too much phosphorus. Well, then they started a different feed program, and it wasn't quite what it was. So
feeding 5 days. Yeah,
things change, and I think on my farm, I think if we could have a better way of hauling our cattle manure, that'd be great. But it would involve more time, and nobody's going to give me more time. That's the only thing.
I went to a European manure conference 2 years ago, and that was really fascinating too, because they're trying all kinds of other technologies too, with biogas and like organo fertilizers, like making fertilizer derivatives off of manure, and worrying about greenhouse gas emissions and ammonia and other things that we're not even thinking about.
They're ahead of us. They're ahead of us, but theirs is driven by their absolute obsession with somehow the climate thing, the whole climate charade. I mean,
and they're also limited on land. You think about that too, right? They have land limitations and all kind of thing.
So are they? So they're utilizing the resource much more proficiently
tightly,
than we
yeah,
are?
right. I would say they're definitely trying to do that and trying other methods of processing and different
as
things.
the European,
I think it depends on the part of the country. Again, are you producing more manure than that your cropland needs in your close vicinity? So on the East Coast, yes. Is that Delmarva, North Carolina,
possibly,
some of those places, pockets
Wisconsin.
of those, some of those pockets, I think, like I said, overall here, we still have lots of cropland in the Midwest on overall. So for the most part, it isn't as huge of a thing that we're going to have to do manure processing technologies quite yet, unless you're on some of these, larger farms.
Right. Of course, as the farmers get larger, then there's a greater concentration there, and it's going to have to go further.
And I could see some of those dairies in like the desert areas and out west too. They have these very large dairies with very minimal cropland.
Yeah.
They're going to be having to do some different things. Does that stuff then just get
dehydrated? I mean, honestly, we're going to see truckloads of dehydrated dairy manure going from somewhere in New Mexico or Arizona or the panhandle of Texas and get on a truck and go 100 miles away.
I think there's going to be all kinds of different, some of them are trying to irrigate out things, especially because they could use water. Doing different composting, processing, digesting.
Yeah, I've seen somebody try to do like a community digester where manure is driven in from, a certain radius. And they make it into, it's a digester. So they take out the water and then it goes back on as a dry product. But
I think one of the more technologies that we're just really starting to see now out here is like the sensors. So you can see nutrients on the go. John Deere has one of those things and people are trying to test them out. I know some farmers are starting to buy them. I know have some research at the University of Minnesota going on with that too. So that's going to be like how close are they to the actual samples that you send to a lab.
You're talking about while it's being applied?
Right. Yeah. As applied nutrients.
I know exactly I know exactly what I'm putting out right now.
Right. Yeah. And how close is that calibrated? Close enough? Is that more precise? I think the 20 years since we've gone to it too, like flow meters have gotten way better.
Yeah.
Scaled even on solid manure application has gotten way better too. So we're really trying to manage this. It's been getting incrementally better over time. There's still obviously lots of room for improvement, but I think big things, continuing to move in that direction.
I equate it to, remember in the old days of fossil fuel, the natural gas on the top would come up and they would just like blow it up and burn it off because it was in the way of getting to the oil. I mean, I that's where I think we still are on utilization of manure. And I'm excited that you went to the European conference because I think there's a resource we're going to get better at. Again, we talked about the biology. We talked about the underwear test. We talked about organic matter. We talked about the fact that we don't even know about the microorganisms that are in our soil. And we've, in large part, abused them, if not destroyed them, with some of our synthetic over application. So I think the future is bright, but there has to be an economic. It's either environmental regulatory that forces it, or economic. It's either stick or carrot. Mm-hmm. Which one's going to move you, Kellie? Stick or carrot?
It depends on the day. No, I'm joking. I think, in my opinion, in order to get things. The way I would like to see things move in agriculture is if we're getting paid for our products. I'll do what you want. If you're going to pay me more, I'll do it. And I think historically that's how it's been. And I'd rather it be that way because I've also seen, the stick part of it is just not environmentally sound as well. I mean, this is all you can do. And so I'm not going to look at it, manure management plans. Here's the max rate you can put on. That's what people put on. It doesn't matter how far they're going or anything. That's what my plan tells me. Well, you can go under that. You can take it further. The stick doesn't allow for a lot of freedom either.
Yeah, or creativity.
All right. The big piece of that is creativity. Are you thinking and making decisions on your farm and not just doing the same thing you did the year before?
And that's where I think manure comes into it, because the more creative producers are going to figure out a way from, again, the environmental part, the economic part, and then obviously there's the soil health part of it. And when we're talking about chunk of ground sold 2 counties away, 3 $13,505 an acre, and you're going to go out there and just do the same stuff that your grandpa did and over apply these synthetics and let that soil degrade, or you're going to start looking at the biology and the resource. And I think that's where this ties into it. Her name is Dr. Nancy Bohl Bormann with the University of Minnesota. If they want to find you, do they find you? Where do they find you?
My email's nlbb@umn.edu. I guess just another one of my big projects I'm working at is a manure nutrient database project called ManureDB. So that just search ManureDB in your whatever search engine you like. And that's one thing we've been working with labs across the country to aggregate manure nutrient data. Like Kellie said, we knew a lot of these published book values of manure characteristics you'd look at and you're like, that's not what we're actually seeing in real life. A lot of them are over 20 years old. So Dr. Melissa Wilson and Dr. Aaron Cordes at the University of Minnesota decided we need to update these values, and working with the Minnesota Supercomputing Institute developers to put this together. We have over 550,000 manure and organic amendment samples in there today from all across the country.
Some very fascinating stuff, seriously. And
right.
You gave me the bullet points, thank goodness, but we're geeking out on the manure. I like it.
Right. So, I mean, okay, yes, we still say like sampling manure on your own farm is number one, the best thing you can do. But if you're building a new barn or going to try a different practice, this might offer, at least a book value to use. It can also help you with benchmarking. Like you said, you get manure from other places. It might be interesting to see like, what are other Indiana farms getting for manure analysis? Or you want to buy some poultry litter. Like what are some of the, average values out there? Or what are some of the other characteristics?
So
I had a question about like micronutrients. Yeah, another way to look at it.
The value of the study is we're commercializing this prior to now uncommercialized product is what I'm hearing, Kellie. And so now it makes it so we can compare and we can.
Yes, right.
And anybody could look that up. And so if you are even thinking about, well, should I even approach a neighbor about buying their manure? Guess what? You got a database. You can go look up how much is in their manure approximately, right. And that type of thing. So
and we're finding like those previous, book values that were out there were just for the whole U.S. And we're finding like, of course, there's huge regional differences.
Because of availability. Well,
storage, what you're feeding, what you're bedding, things. I mean, different feedstocks are different parts of the country. All that, how they're stored in warmer climates in the South. There's be less ammonium in a lot of the cases. All those different things. Yeah, hogs in North Carolina manure is very different than the Midwest.
Yeah.
And the manure storages are very different. So that's things we're looking at. Our trends changing over time. We're watching some of those things and kind of starting to look at that, how we're monitoring some of those changes as well. We're working on updating the American Society of Agricultural Biological Engineers, their manure characteristics standard. So we're working through that right now. So anyways, modelers, it's a better source of data for these agricultural and environmental modelers too. They're, using some really old information.
You imagine the person's listening.
Anyway.
I didn't know that there's this much. This is a fascinating thing. So anyway, if they want to learn more about it, they go to Manure.
Yeah, search ManureDB and you'll find all.
As in database?
Yep, that's correct. Yes. We even have links to manure value calculators also on there. There's also presentations about it. We just had a paper come out. Our first paper about it came out last month.
I'll put ManureDB.
Check it out.
I'm gonna put the.
You can make some visualizations, look at some tables for real quick things on the first page, and on the second page you can do a data explorer and download it if you're really into looking at some other details.
I'm gonna put the link. I'm gonna put the link on my stuff.
That's great.
All right, Kellie.
Thanks.
I think that I could geek out and talk shit, literally, with Nancy for hours and hours. But anyway, I do got to get out of this. It's a long episode, but it's a really good one because I see this as a future. Again, pressure for regenerative, the economic aspect of crop inputs, the environmental angle on over-application of fertility from synthetic sources. This is all coming. All these roads lead to this thing right here. And the fact that we've got an expert right here that's talking about utilizing it. So are you going to be using more manure 5 years from now than you did 5 years ago? Yes. Am I right about that, Kellie?
We got to get more animals. we might use the same amount of manure on more acres in the next 5 years. How about that?
All right. If you want to get a hold of Kellie for any reason, get a hold of me because she probably doesn't have a website at her farm, or do you?
She does.
I actually do. Yeah, we're BlairFarmLLC.com. Now, It's not as updated as like the Damian Mason website, but I am a full-time farmer and a full-time mom, so I do what I can when I can. But Blair Farm
BLAIR, Blair Farm LLC.
Yep.
Got it. Till next time. Her name's Kellie, and she's joined by Nancy. This is awesome. We literally did, we'd say the show went to shit, but you know what? It was a good one because we're talking about all things manure. And again, this is a very valuable resource. And one last couple of facts on the way out the door because Nancy gave them to me. What is it? 1.4 billion tons of manure is produced in the United States every year, with increasing trends of animals raised in the United States, not only for domestic consumption, but also for exports to other countries. Obviously, there's about 50% more hogs now in the United States than there were 25 years ago. This trend continues. I think that you're going to have to pay attention to this, and you heard it here first on the Business of Agriculture. Till next time, that's Kellie, that's Nancy, I'm Damian Mason. Thank you very much. This is the Business of Agriculture. Hey, sincere thanks for joining us here on another episode of the Business of Agriculture. I want to ask you, if you farm, are you looking for more productive efficiencies to grow higher yielding, better performing crops? Well, of course you are. New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. If you want to learn more about the New Fields Ag product lineup, go to newfieldsag.com for information.